Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Practice of Love podcast. My name is Lair Torrent. I'm your licensed marriage and family therapist. I am with my partner, my wife, my podcasting partner, my muse, the love of my life, Ashely Torrent. She is also a therapist and intuitive medium. Again, this is the Practice of Love podcast. It's been a little while since we've been back in these chairs doing this thing. So if we're a little rusty, we apologize. But lots going on in the Torrent household. So it's been a minute since we've had a chance to pod.
Do you want to talk about our latest obsession?
Oh, our latest obsession? I think maybe that's you. You should speak for yourself.
It's your latest obsession.
Ladies and gentlemen, my wife is cresting 50 years old. I know when you look at her face and you see her, you're like, how is that even possible? Because listen, I can't believe I'm married to a 50-year-old woman, but I am, and I love it. She's amazing. She's extraordinary. About 10 years ago, she came to me and said, listen, this is what I'm going to do, and you can come along for the ride if you like, but I'm doing it. She said, I'm going to become a surfer, and son of a bitch, now we surf. And so there's been things like this that have happened, right? Like a little while ago, she came to me and said, hey, you know what? I think I want to be around horses more, right? So guess what we are now? Horse people. We rent a horse. Yeah, we rent a horse now. So we've got one of those. So time and time again, this happened with kids, right? I was iffy on the kids thing. And you came to me one day and you said, listen, we have to podcast the truth, Ashely. And you came to me and you said,
had a big role in that.
I didn't mind my part. I reprised my role with Jasper. You said, I think it's time we have kids. And I was like, I'm good with dogs for a minute. And you're like, I think we're ready. And guess what we have now? Kids. You came to me not too long ago and you said, hey, guess what I can do? I can talk to dead people. Guess what you do now? You're a full-blown psychic medium. Holy shit.
It's never boring.
It's never boring. Well, now it's skateboarding.
Yes. Having so much fun. So not good, but having so much fun.
She is like a little girl. She's like a little kid again out there. And it's so fun to watch. It's amazing. Of course, she's a great athlete. So she's selling herself short. Yes, it's scary. And so, are you going really high up on those ramps? Not really yet, but you're getting there and you're doing it and you're out there and you look good doing it.
Don't let him fool you. You're having, what'd you say?
I said, you look good doing it.
But don't let him fool you. He's enjoying it just as much as I am. We're having so much fun. We are like two kids.
I'm an eager participant in all of your nonsense, all of the things that you drag us into, and I reluctantly go, but end up enjoying myself.
Right. And then we have no time for anything else.
No, that includes the surfing, that includes the children. And then when you said we need 2 dogs.
You're so full of crap. These things bring you so much joy. If I didn't bring these into your life, like.
Who knows where I would be.
I don't even know.
You bring in all sorts of good things, and you've outed so many not so great things like processed cheese.
So really, chicken and guac and processed cheese.
Oof, processed cheese. She came into my apartment when we first got together, and she looked in the refrigerator and she was going through it, and she's like, "You realize there's nothing in here is actually food." Is what she said to me.
There's no food. There's nothing.
I was like, there's
real.
plenty of food in there. There's like, no, this is a chemical experiment. And you held up a package of American cheese slices, which I found to be delicious and still do, but I don't eat them. And said, this is not actually food. And I know now that you're correct. Yeah.
No.
I would be 1,000 pounds and dead if not for you.
Oh God. Yeah.
And dead. It would be.
Yeah, probably.
So
Probably.
I think this is a great segue personally into our topic.
Yes.
Not mourning the dead, but mourning the living.
Yeah. Yeah. You created this title for this process. I really love it. So What does mourning the living mean to you? Tell me about that.
It is a process that we go through. It's one we don't often talk about, at least not in these terms, when we have had to disconnect from a significant relationship in our lives. When I think about it, it's typically with a family member. Those people where it's sort of non-normative to disembark and detach from the relationship. But it can really be any relationship where you, and I think people do this with romantic relationships too. It's like you are no longer able to be in relationship with that person. You have to understand that they are still out there in the world. You may have contact with them or cursory contact with them from time to time, but you have to understand that you're no longer able to be in that relationship. And therefore we are in a process. I think, mourning is a process, but this becomes the process of mourning the living and the sort of nuanced pieces that we have to go through in order to become accustomed to the fact that I might be able to have you in my heart, but I cannot have you in my home.
Mm-hmm. No, it's really challenging because, often with like breakups and things, there's no closure. And with death, it can feel like there's no closure, but there is an ending. There's something to process and work through. But when someone is still alive, and I guess, like you said, with romantic partner, but I think with family members, they're still going on, they're relating to other people in the family. And often those of us who have chosen not to be in the family dynamic anymore, it's a very strange thing to be existing, knowing that these blood relatives are out there just doing their thing and you're no longer a part of it. And it's by choice. And, I think vice versa. I wonder if the people who are on the other side of it, I wonder if they experience the mourning.
I would imagine they would have to in their way. Now, how one goes about that, and again, not many people are calling it mourning the living. I think very often it's sort of maybe through some sort of distancing technique, whether it be anger or disparaging thoughts, narratives about this person and why, for instance, they are choosing to no longer be in our lives. But I think it's the rare person, typically the person who's in therapy, when a therapist will take you through that sense of like, there is a duality to this experience, right? That you can love this person. Like I said, I can have you in my heart, but I cannot have you in my home. That denotes that sense that I still do have some version of love perhaps for this person, or a recognition that they once held this coveted space in my life, but they no longer do.
That's such a good point, because I feel like if someone on the other side was actually in the mourning, they would probably be doing some work to try to understand what was actually happening, and maybe repair would be possible. So, from my standpoint, a perfect example of mourning the living is, I haven't been in relationship to my family for about over 20 years now. And I remember this Christmas, this came up, and it happens every holiday, I feel like, every Christmas especially. But I remember just laying on the couch watching movies with the kids, and it just hit me, this grief of like this space where that some people used to exist in that space, but they no longer do. And it's not like I wanted them there, but there was a grief in recognizing the loss of having those people like my parents and my brother who knew me at that time, of being able to share those memories and those holiday experiences and to be able to talk or connect in that way. So there's just this, it feels like this empty space that I was grieving of not being known or not being able to know them in that way because of who they are and how they've chosen to act or behave in their life. That doesn't feel safe to me.
Well, it does seem to come up often around those notable moments when you sort of get nostalgic and you hearken back to, and then there's this notable space. There's this noted place that's no longer set for this person, or we're not doing that thing. Rituals will bring that out, like family rituals, holidays will sort of make you hearken back to those times. And, maybe some of those times were good. Maybe there's some of those times were terrible, but you still kind of have that sense of like that space that is there. And, I'm estranged from my family for somewhat similar reasons. One in particular is addiction can often
Mm-hmm.
necessitate the separation, and that one's often part of the mourning processes. And you really helped me with this at the beginning stages of this. It was where I couldn't be into a relationship with my mother any longer because her alcoholism had gotten so bad that she had become dangerous for you. She had become dangerous for me. We couldn't have her watching the kids anymore.
No.
And so that one's a hard one. Like that aspect of mourning this person that sort of went away over the course of time. She was sort of gone. When I look back on it, she was gone before she was actually gone.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that mourning process, I recognized, because it was interesting, my mourning process around that, and we've been checking in. It was like, all of a sudden I was like, yeah, this is just what this is. And I almost didn't have any real emotion about it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I recognized is I had been mourning this relationship for a very long time.
Yeah.
Right. And so it had been on a slow drip, sort of unconsciously. I was recognizing those moments where I was like, oh, that's not sustainable. That's an untenable scenario. If that doesn't change, man, we're in trouble. And I was sort of, I think, plotting these over the course of years. I know you were seeing it for a very long time. And, I had put her on this pedestal and had sort of been in denial about what we were witnessing until finally it all sort of came crashing down and I was able to see it. And so I think for me that part of the mourning process is like I sometimes feel like I don't feel anything about it. I'm just sort of done. And as a therapist, I'm like, oh, that's sketchy, and I got question marks about it. Anyone who says they don't have any feelings about their mother not being in their relationship in their lives anymore. And maybe it's not that I don't have any feelings about it. It's like I feel like I've grieved it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's some acceptance of it.
Better said.
There's acceptance of this is who she is. This is what the relationship is, and this is what I need to deal with. And I think everyone has a different process with this. I think I know I grieved for longer than I feel like you did. I feel like I think did I grieve not being in relationship to my family, which was my choice. And then interesting thing I want to say is I think sometimes people feel like they can't grieve or mourn because they're like, well, I made the choice. So they feel guilty for having any grief or mourning that they're not in relationship to these people. And I'm like, absolutely, you can grieve and mourn. Like you made the choice, but it still means like on holidays, it sucks. It's lonely, especially at first. It's really lonely. And like on my birthday, it's like, I want to hear from them, but I don't. I'm pissed if they don't reach out, but I'm also pissed if they do because fuck them. Right. I mean, I've gotten to a place where I don't feel so much charge around it. And I have come to a more acceptance and compassionate place for understanding them. But I do want to share that that's a really real stage that people go through in this process of feeling guilty for having feelings about it, even though they made the choice. And I know for me, I did things at the beginning, like for years, I was trying to exit the relationship to my mother. I would take a year off or I would take a month off or, I would go through phases and then go back in and go back out. So I feel like when I finally did it, I was really prepared for the completion and the ending of it. But I think it goes through different stages of it, but it's a real thing. Mourning not having parents. It's a big deal.
It's huge, and it's not something that you expect. It's not. You never think that you're going to be a person who would choose that. Like I put that in air quotes. Choose it. You're not really choosing it. You're having to pick your own well-being, or in my case, I had to pick the well-being of my wife and children. There's a version of this, perhaps, if I were single, maybe I would have hung in there longer. Maybe the things that came at me would have been decidedly different if the situation were different. But you never really think you're going to be a person who, and I think that's one of the things I have to help people who come into my practice deal with is like the guilt, right? The guilt becomes very myopic in the sense that it says like, oh, I did this thing. And what we do in that narrative is we omit and we prune from that narrative. And I'm like, hold on. I always say this to them, I'm like, let's check the math, because you've been telling me these stories for some time, and now you've decided to do this thing. And so you shift back into this young part of yourself that wants to make you all bad for having done this. And you've been now discounting all the reasons and all the things that took you to this point. Mm-hmm. One of the things I wanted to run by, do you ever feel, or have you felt like you have to explain it to people? Like they don't really want to get it. They don't really understand it. And so that they're, you almost, I don't know if you say you look for their approval, but you have to kind of convince them that this is okay.
I used to feel like I did. A lot of people don't get it. It goes against a lot of people's belief system. I find a lot of people are uncomfortable with the idea of separation from family, and they want to talk you out of it, and they want to make it better, and they want to fix it. And what I've come to is like, in no other relationship would we ask someone to stay. We would not encourage people to stay in a romantic relationship if they are being emotionally or physically abused. We would not encourage children to be in relationship with people who are sexually abusing them or physically or emotionally abuse them. This is the only time where we try to convince people that somehow it's okay. I remember saying that to my therapist once. I was like, you would never tell a little girl to go and be in relationship to her teacher that molested her. But but people tell me I should be in relationship to a parent that has physically or emotionally abused me. And she was like, oh, I never thought about it that way. And I was like, well, we need to start thinking about it that way.
But that's
because
your
for
mom.
many of us, this isn't a past behavior. For many of us, the behavior continues on. And that's why you and I have chosen not to be in relationship to our family. It'd be different if, look, shit goes down. And my parents, if either of them ever came to me and said, I am really sorry, how can I repair this? And they meant it, and you could see behavior changing.
That's right.
That's completely different. I'm not saying nothing is forgiven, but we have to make choices to say like, yeah, I know the toxic is overused, but it's toxic.
Well, what do we need to move on from something like that? And it was the thing that I needed was the thing that was omitted from all of the conversations with my mother in particular, and my stepfather, quite frankly. And that's what you've alluded to is personal responsibility, right? That ownership of saying, hey, I know that I did this. And we have a friend whose father was not in her life because of drugs. And it was years and years later that he circled back around and he owned that, that he did these things, that it was his fault. It was not her fault that she had to pull away and couldn't be in a relationship to him. And so consequently, it's not like a perfect relationship or anything like that. She's able to be more in contact with this person and to allow that space for some semblance of a relationship to occur. But it was because he was able to own some of his shit. And I remember saying to my mother, you refuse to take any responsibility for anything that you're doing or anything that you're saying. And she said, I don't know what you mean when you say that. And I said, it's evident that you don't know what I mean.
Clearly.
It's obvious that you have no idea what I'm speaking English words and somehow it's being garbled in your brain, because she just couldn't do it. She could not own the pain that she had caused. She could not own the things that she had done. I think perhaps it was too much. And so, there's this alternate narrative that gets written often in these situations, and it's then put on you. And, you see people who adhere to the idea, well, it's your mom, or come on, it's your dad. Right. And to that, I say, yes, that is my mom. That is my dad, but they should have acted like it.
Right.
Because I can tell you right now, as we do this with our kids. I think we may have done it earlier today. When we do shit in our relationship with our children, and we feel like maybe we've hurt their feelings or said some things we're not perfect parents, we circle back and say, hey, buddy, not my best outing. I need to apologize. And they'll go, no, no. And you see that need to kind of like take care of the parent. Like, nope, you're not going to take care of me on this. I'm going to own my shit. And I frankly don't know what we're setting them up for, because most people don't do that. And they're going to go out into the world expecting that people are going to own their stuff and take personal responsibility and own their shit. And I don't know if it's going to happen. Hopefully things are changing. But, that seems to be the piece that was missing for, I think, both of us, is this unwillingness to ever. And look, I think it's one of the hardest things in the world. And so when I see it, I'm always apt to tell my clients, no, okay, wait a minute. When I see a parent circling back and kind of owning something, it's so hard to say, this is the tough one for everyone, for most people. I was a bad parent. In that little situation, in the micro or in the macro, it's really hard. Like overarchingly, all those years, I was not good. I was bad. That's a tough pill to swallow. But in order to make repair for any of you people out there who your folks have been estranged from you and are saying these things, you might want to take a peek at, like, is there something that I need to own? Is there something that I've been refusing to own because it's just too painful?
Yeah.
It would cause an onslaught of guilt. I mean, the idea that I'm owning that I was a bad parent, that's a tough one.
Well, I think that's where so much of the grief comes, when like we choose to exit these relationships and the person doesn't fight for it. Like, I know for me, I attempted conversations, I attempted curiosity, I attempted to understand, but I was not met. And when ownership and responsibility is not taken, no acknowledgement of the pain caused, that's so painful, because it feels like you're a non-entity. It feels like you're just invisible and you don't exist. And it does suck to say I was a bad parent. I mean, I've had to look, we've talked about our, on this podcast, we talked about our oldest son. He went through so many issues when he was a kid. And I look back constantly and recognize I didn't realize how bad my PTSD was when I was pregnant, and when I was, just when we had kids, like early on. I didn't know till Jake was probably like 4 how bad it was, or 5. But the combination of my PTSD and what he was going through, I've had to say to him, man, I didn't handle like what you were going through very well. I would check out. I was just like frustrated. I was lost. I was confused. I didn't know what to do. And we've had conversations about this with him. We said those years were hard, and they weren't hard because you did anything wrong. They were hard because, like, for me, I was like, I was lost. I was just lost as a mother. And that sucks to have to say that. But man, not saying it feels worse in my body. Not talking to him about it, and not like starting the healing now of like, let's explore what happened and help us both understand. I couldn't live with it. I couldn't live with not saying it.
Well, I mean, I think that's what makes you and anyone who can do that a different parent. You're not parenting from your ego. And I'll say it takes a strong ego to come back around, but part of mourning the living is a recognition that perhaps they're never going to own that piece. And
accepting that.
Well, what I've seen happen a bit with you in particular, is you end up gaslighting yourself.
Yeah. Because when I do get that birthday text, or that text that after the hurricanes come through, hope you're okay. Well, it's a little late now. I start to question. And then if I engage at all in any sort of light conversation, I'm constantly reminded, you don't know or see me. You can't get it.
Right. And there's some hope, I think, from the younger aspects of ourselves that maybe we're wrong. And, there's a real pull within us when we were children, and in those childlike parts that still live within us, to make the parent good enough. Right. From that very object relations sort of place, we need to make our parents good enough. Wouldn't the world be a better place? Wouldn't our lives be better if our parents were just good enough? And so in doing that, we will kind of throw a fog up in front of ourselves and like, well, really, maybe that wasn't, I mean, that sounds crazy that they would really. And so we start questioning everything that we've seen. And I know that, I was kind of doing that with myself while I was still in a relationship to her, kind of like making it out like this thing that I'm seeing, really, maybe that's not as bad as I think it is. And it wasn't until, you came to me and said, this is happening. This is actually what was going on. And it gave you no pleasure to say that to me. But it was through your lens that I was able to kind of like go, oh, okay, maybe this is in fact what's happening. But
I think we did that for each other. I think you did that for me. You were, because I would gaslight myself and you would be like, no, this is what happened. I mean, even sometimes today, 20 years later, you remind me, no, this is what happened. I did want to touch on the fact that, as our parents get older, my dad's like 82. The idea of him passing at some point, I think there is this pressure. I don't feel it so much, but I know people talk about this pressure to try to repair or heal something, to have those last words or maybe to have those last special moments before someone transitions. And I think from a spiritual perspective, what I've come to is that our parents are vessels. Like, our mothers are vessels, which we come into this world. But I don't believe we're meant to stay in relationship to these people for our entire lives. Like, what if they're just playing a part and supporting bringing us into this world? What if that's the connection? What if there are teachers and that's what we're supposed to get? And separation is a very healthy aspect of this. And so at this point in my life, wanting to tie up any loose ends or make sure something's all clean and nice isn't realistic. I think I've come to accept the part that my parents played a role, and I've come to feeling grateful for the things that they taught me. I don't think I would be the woman I am had it gone through those things and those things shaping me in the way they did. So I feel like there's a lot of spiritual acceptance about it. I don't feel the same agitation or charge around them. I actually don't think about them much anymore at all. And that feels peaceful. So I just want to say to anyone out there who feels this pressure to make things all nice and to have this, I want to support their transition and heal those things before they pass. I think it's important to ask if that's realistic or actually right for you. Because I don't think spirit, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, wants us to put ourselves in a situation like that if it doesn't feel right or good. What are your thoughts on that?
A couple of things. One, we hear a lot that it's overdone, but I'm going to do it anyway. Closure. Well, I need closure. And I'm a big proponent of like, if you're in relationship to somebody and you've got some stuff and this, you see this a lot, like, well, I haven't really talked with my dad about this thing or that thing, but we're still love there. We're still in a relationship. I'm a big proponent of like, let's not do it post-mortem. Let's have those conversations before someone's in a pine box. Right. But in a relationship that has been estranged, like the one with your parents as an example, or the one with my mother, I don't find it necessary in those situations to go and find this sort of amorphous closure. And we hear about that a lot in romantic. Well, I just need closure. And really what that is, it's like this morbid curiosity to go back and to see if it's any different. And I can tell you, I don't have any numbers to back up what I'm about to say, but I can tell you time and time and time again, when I see people kind of pop back in to really, you're just checking to see the temperature on that. It ends up being the same as it was. And that real closure comes from your own personal work. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I feel like I've created closure for myself, that if my parents were to pass, I think that's I remember you asking me this question. If they were to pass tomorrow, would you be okay with that? And I remember I got to the point where I'd be like, yeah, I have nothing more to say. And coming to a place of peace that I've done everything I can, and that I really believe that I was meant to set myself free. And that's part of my spiritual path, What about you? Do you feel like you have achieved closure within you around your relationship with your parents?
It's really my mother, because I really didn't have a father figure in my life. So I wonder about that from time to time. I'm like, you can kind of, if you're in this situation, you put yourself, in your mind, you'll think about that from time to time. Like, what will I do when I get the call? What will I do when I find out? Like, will I get a call? This is a question you asked me this morning, right? Like, will I get it? Will I find out? And I wonder that too. Like, would her husband drop me a line and let me know if she died first? And how would I feel? I like to think I know. I like to think I've done enough work on myself to kind of say, that would I be okay with it? I think I would be sad. I think that there would be probably another layer of sadness, like normal sadness, some grief around that she had passed so alone, when she had the opportunity to be in relationship to me, to be in relationship to her, to her grandkids, to be in relationship to you, and she chose other. So there would be, and so I want to normalize all the feelings that come up around it, like in the sense of mourning the living. It becomes a process of coping, like noticing those holidays that they're not there. But it's a process of coping, and also choosing yourself and your own mental, emotional, and sometimes physical well-being over the thing that we're told we should do.
Right.
Right.
And as lonely as it can be, it does get better. It gets
Mm-hmm.
a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you feel like?
Yeah, I mean, but part of mourning the living for us is like when we see our friends who have kids whose kids have grandparents.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's a tough one.
Yeah.
And so, for anyone who thinks we kind of go into this lightly, trust me, this is not for the faint of heart. This is absolute necessity. But so it's really sad. Like when my kids don't get calls from the grandparents, they don't get grandparents coming to see their stuff. And, that part really fucking sucks. But
it's sad when things happen to us and like, there's no one to share. I mean, we share it with each other, and then we each have therapists we share it with.
That's right. Thanks, Hugo.
But I think I wanted to add to what you said. Don't get me wrong. When my father passes, there will be grief in that an opportunity was never taken for healing. But I also, from a spiritual place, wonder maybe that's just what we agreed on, that in this life that wasn't to be had. And as a medium, I can't tell you how many parents and relatives come through and apologize and say they're so sorry. I feel like I have the opportunity to witness so much healing that happens. And it's sad that it happens when they've already passed. And I will say it is possible. It's kind of a cool thing to see.
It feels to me when you talk about it, and it seems like every time you're dealing with a parent and it was an estranged or a difficult relationship, that parent comes through and is apologetic. And if I don't know, is it because the ego is no longer with them, and so that energy can sort of see it differently?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that there is no ego in spirit, so it's a soul, but that souls are still evolving, and I feel like when they communicate with us, part of their healing happens when we communicate with them and we acknowledge their apology. Now, I don't get the sense that they expect forgiveness or require forgiveness, but man, do they make an effort to offer it? Do they make an effort to tie up loose ends? I can't tell you how much insight I've gained about my grandparents through medium mystic readings from other people that they've shared with me, like why they acted the way they did or what they were going through, things that weren't said in the family, things that as a child I didn't understand. So it's a beautiful opportunity when someone passes and they come through, because they can share insight that we just don't get, that the human doesn't communicate, but the soul does communicate.
That's right.
And shares so much more of their journey, so many layers that I just think we can't understand in our relationships the way they're set up.
There's a point that keeps kind of rolling around in my head, and that is how therapists tend to react to cutoff in a relationship with family member.
How do they? Oh, yes, I know how they do.
How do they? How do they? Do you remember?
Well, you were in the room. My first experience, I totally forgot this. My first experience, one therapist said, well, I like to imagine there's a sign on the wall above your head that said they did the best they knew how to do. Now, that is absolutely the wrong thing to say to someone at the beginning of their journey, maybe even in the middle, until they're in a place where they want to get there.
I
Wrong.
was I was in the room for that. Like Ashely in the beginning of our relationship, like two budding therapists. She was like, "Let's go to therapy together," and I was like, "All right."
No,
You
I
know,
was
I'm.
seeing a therapist and you came to meet her.
That's what I mean. You're like, come, let's
Yeah.
come to my therapist with in my therapy session with me. I was like, all right, let's do it. And I was game. And so we march in there, and she said that, and I was like, what did I say?
You were like, "Are you kidding me? That's what you're going to say to her?" And then after the session, you were like, "You need a new therapist."
That's what you're
I
gonna
think
suggest.
you prefaced that with, "I probably am not allowed to say this, but you need a new therapist."
Yeah, I did say that. I said, I know I shouldn't say this to you, but I'm going to. You need a new therapist. She was terrible. Um,
Now, my next therapist was like, "Absolutely.
mhm.
I agree with you 100%. You shouldn't
Well,
spend any more time around those people."
well, I went through marriage and family therapy school, and some of the older school family systems therapists say cutoff is not real. Cutoff
Mm.
actually can't happen, and their argument is that there is still an energetic bond, and so you can't have cutoff. You have to go and deal with it.
Mm. I don't
And
know. This cutoff feels pretty good.
it feels far
It
better
feels
than,
pretty spacious.
yeah, other than the things we've outlined. It's like we're not being glib when we say this. It's like this is preferable. Can you imagine anyone who's listening kind of shaking your head? Can you imagine that not having your parents around in their old age, not having your kids have grandparents? This is a preferable scenario,
Yeah.
or even one that someone would consider. And so,
Mhm.
immediately upon hearing that cutoff is not real, I immediately thrust my hand into the air, as I often tended to in those classes, and began arguing vehemently with this well-known therapist that this is, of course, it's real. What if this person has a personality disorder? What if there is toxicity? What if there's abuse? What if there's nope, nope, nope? And across the board, it's like you have to make repair. And I told her at that point, I said, I will never ask a client to make repair with somebody who is absolutely toxic, who is absolutely abusive. I would never ask. And so if you're in a
Oh,
situation where, you know, you are experiencing these types of things again and again and again, and your therapist is telling you that, well, they did the best that they could, or cutoff isn't real, or that's your mom, you do need to rethink that relationship with that therapist, or
well,
call them up short.
again, it goes back to, would that same teacher ask a
Exactly.
wife to stay in a relationship where there's domestic violence? I don't understand. Just because you're blood related, that doesn't mean that does sorry, that's it just doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't
So
make
I'm always condoning, like, speak your truth, communicate, be curious, listen, ask questions. And if you're not met, if there's no understanding and you're not feeling safe and it feels more harmful or dangerous to your well being, then cutoff is necessary. I know I wanted to die being around my family. Like, I would literally spend time with them and I would come home and I would crawl into the darkest hole.
it was the worst.
And I got my life energy back when I separated.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, it's just not so black or white.
No, and you know, everyone's version of mourning the living is probably going to be a little bit different. And these are just some of the pieces that we've picked up uh, as two people who are currently mourning the living in our own way, and also help clients on a daily basis do some of the same when necessary. Um, it's a ever evolving process, and it's certainly something that should be uh, it should be focused on in your life, whether I think personally and with the help of a professional, because these are formative relationships. These are relationships with people who have witnessed your life, and that can be really hard when we lose witnesses um, to our childhood. There's
Mm.
few things that are more profound than that. And so if you find yourself in the place where you're like even considerate of this or questioning, you should definitely talk to a therapist, and hopefully you get a good one.
And
Because
that's
there are,
such a good point.
yeah.
Like, I don't have any of the things I had as a kid. I don't have any
Mhm.
toys or books or clothes or I have some pictures my grandmother gave to me, so I have some memories like that. But it's no joke,
Right. It's often mourning the loss of those things too. Those things that most people can look back at the scrapbooks and the pieces and the
passed
parts
down
of
to
your
their kids.
yeah, yeah. Your mother
Yeah.
decided to hold those for ransom.
Yeah. And, just some final thoughts is that this is such a personal choice,
Hmm.
one that's not made lightly. And I really trust anybody that's thinking about this to just listen to what feels right for them.
Hmm.
But it's nobody's business but yours. And if you're choosing this because it's of your highest good and it's the most harmonious way to live your life and it's life affirming, I think that's really important. I think then the answer is clear. And you will heal. You will heal. You will
And
mourn and you will grieve and you will find healing and you will
mhm,
also find new family. We have new family. We have
that's right.
community. We
That's
have
right.
people in our life that adore our children
Hmm.
and show up for them regularly. So it doesn't look like grandparents, but it looks in what we've created. And that's
Oh,
valuable too.
what's that Richard Bach quote that I love to butcher? That the trappings of family are rarely found under the roof you grew up under.
Mm.
That family is made of love and respect.
Yeah.
Um, and so, the thing the final parting thought I have is people are going to have their feelings about it. Like
Mm.
your closest friends, when you tell them, they will have their feelings about it because maybe
Mm.
they're in a situation where it's like, it's like divorce, right? People are going to have their
Mm.
feelings about it. If you're considering thinking about leaving or in a divorce in the middle of it, it makes people feel stuff about themselves. And so they
Yeah.
will
I even had a
project that.
massage therapist like massaging me, tell me, well, blood is blood, family is family, and giving me like a lecture as he
What the
was
hell was that?
massaging me. I was like, this is weird.
Oh, that one was weird
This
for
was
other reasons
years ago.
too,
But
wasn't it? Wasn't that one weird for other reasons too?
yeah, it was all weird.
Oh,
But sorry, I interrupted you.
okay. Well, I forgot what I was saying. Thank you very much. We're going to talk about this off air.
Um,
This feels good to me. I don't know how it felt to anybody
it
else, but
feels
I
good.
enjoyed my time. Yeah.
I always enjoy my time. I feel so excited when I get to talk to you, even though I talk to you all the time.
You're my favorite person in the world. So, yeah.
Mine too.
All
Yeah,
right.
you're mine too.
So, this is, I don't know what edition this is of the Practice of Love podcast. Fill in the number, Brendan. Um,
Brandon.
Brandon. Shit. Feel bad now. That's how long it's been since we've done a podcast.
I know we are committed to showing up more.
Mm-hmm.
We are committed to that.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed this. I don't know if this caused more questions than answers, but often good and evocative depth topics do cause more questions than answers from time to time. We're happy to field any of those questions that you may have. Certainly, you can ask those over Instagram DMs. What do you have going on next?
I don't know right now. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You can
yet.
check out Ashely at what's your Instagram handle?
Ashely Torrent 29.
That's right. Or me, Lair Torrent Holistic Therapist. These are on Instagram. Obviously, each of our websites. And if you feel like purchasing the book, The Practice of Love is available at all your finer book sellers. Thank you so much.
Thank you.